Good morning, afternoon and evening, gentlemen, gentlewomen, children, elders, whoever is watching this video today on Friday at the start of the weekend according to some. Today we have to track back and look at something that we have let go for a while because it wasn't quite yet into the game, in this case into the alpha. I am talking about Paladin, and I am talking about the holy part of Paladin, because even though the Paladin talent tree has been already added to the alpha, what was missing was holy. Holy Paladin wasn't quite there, and we have gotten the Holy Paladin tree right along the Warlock talent trees. Now, here's the thing, I wouldn't really want to make an entire video just about Holy Paladin. I made one yesterday and that was for the whole of the Warlocks, so I wouldn't really spend my time making a video just about one single spec. However, I found it to be necessary because this is at the moment, you know, there are going to be some debates. Perhaps the Feral Druid players, perhaps even the Shadow Priest players might raise up some debate about this, but this is likely at the very least on the podium, at the very least high up in the rankings for the worst of the talent trees being released. Obviously, we can all hope that the way in which this will evolve will be similar to the Hunter talent trees, which were also in the race for the worst of all talent trees released, but then over time they have gotten approximately 77 different changes at the rate of one new blue post from Blizzard every day, changing the Hunter talent tree. So let's just hope that the Holy Paladin tree goes in the same direction, gets changed with the same swiftness that the Hunter's talents did. However, at the moment, we have to point out just how bad this talent tree is. We have already talked about the general Paladin tree back when we looked at Protection Paladin the first time around, so it's not that there is much to point out about this. Most of the stuff here is expected. There were a few interesting changes, like the new, I guess, Retribution Aura, which also now gives you Seraphim if any party or raid members takes more than 50% of their health in damage. That's kind of interesting. Most of the other stuff was returning from your current setup. There are some new combinations now. For example, even as a Holy Paladin, you can choose to take Blessing of Spell Warding, which can be quite nice. You have some power options in the general tree because your Avenging Wrath cooldown reduction, your Seraphim, your Med Paragon, and your Divine Purpose, for example, are now all in the general tree. There are some complaints, of course, still existing from the general tree, like for example, why does one of the worst mobility abilities in the game, Divine Steed, is on a 4-point talent setup, for example. But beyond that, the problem here is the newly revealed and the newly released Holy Paladin talent tree. Why is it terrible? Well, let's just go over then the Holy tree. In case you are not too familiar with Holy Paladin, even though they have been quite popular and quite meta, perhaps not this season and perhaps not for most of Season 3, but definitely for the first half of this expansion, Holy Paladin was the main pick in Mythic Plus. It was also one of the main picks, and it still is in the raid, so you might have seen quite a few Holy Paladins, and you know that they work by staying in melee, you know that they work by using abilities like Crusader Strike, like Judgment, like Hammer of Wrath. They build Holy Power with that, and then they heal by using their spenders Light of Dawn for AoE healing and Word of Glory for single target healing. They have essentially Forsaken abilities like Holy Light or Flash of Light, which make you cast, and instead they do melee damage. Essentially they work as a melee DPS. They are counted by the game for game mechanics as melee players, not as healers. They count as a melee, so that has been their playstyle. Over time, Blizzard has tried to add this or that, to add a few more things, to be able to give the option to bring the Paladin back to a casted playstyle, a hard cast, you know, a Holy Light, Flash of Light kind of playstyle. Now, why and when this becomes a problem is when you get the Dragonflight talents and you try to mash together, to mix and match these two different playstyles at the same time. And it turns out to be quite the mess, because when you start and look at the talents, you start from the general layout of your Holy Shock, your Holy Light, and your Light of Dawn. Up to this point, we are okay. There's nothing to complain about here. You go then to choose between Bestow Faith and the new added Unending Light, which can be quite interesting, stacking increased Word of Glory, single target heal, the more you cast AoE Spender, which is kind of nice, it's interesting. Where we already start to have some problems is in the following talents. Now, as you can see here, this one is the talent that gives you a second charge of Crusader Strike, which is quite it is quite a massive requirement if you want to do melee playstyle for Holy. But to get to this talent, you have to take this one, which increases the healing of your Holy Light and Flash of Light, which you are not going to cast if you are playing with Crusader Strike. So you have to spend 1 point here and then 2 further points into Beacon of Light, transferring additional 20% of the amount healed, which is fine. Another problem, one of the mandatory things definitely that you will want in the party, in the raid, really anywhere, is going to be Aura Mastery. One of the few damage reduction abilities for healers in the game, with Spirit Link for Shaman and Barrier for Priest. That's a must for a Paladin. And again, you have to take Infusion of Light, which is your current base default passive as a Holy Paladin, which is completely unused because you're not playing the ranged type of healer. And this will be a recurring style, so to speak. For example, to put together your melee style, you also have to go and play with Light of the Martyr. This is going to be the entire line. You have Light of the Martyr, you have the Conduit, which significantly empowers your Light of the Martyr healing by quite a lot, and then you have, of course, the Legendary that enables everything Marad's Dying Breath. Up to this point, you only had to waste a couple or so talents that you wouldn't normally want to as a Holy Paladin. Things start getting rough once you want to get to the juicy part of your talent setup, the juicy part of the build, you know, all of the main capstone abilities and choices and options. When you want to get there, it becomes kind of an issue. With this setup, you are going to start seeing things like Power of the Silver Hand. Holy Light and Flash of Light have a chance to grant you Power of the Silver Hand, increasing the healing of your next Holy Shock. This requires you, of course, to cast Holy Light and Flash of Light, which you normally wouldn't want to. Further setups, after you go down this mandatory line for Aura Mastery, if you want to bridge this gap down this line, you have to spend 3 points, not just 1 or 2, but 3 points for Divine Revelations to further empower your Infusion of Light by further empowering your Flash of Light and Holy Light, which you normally wouldn't want to cast. Even the new stuff, because up to this point, most of the stuff are things you already have. We mentioned the Light of the Martyr build, the Light of the Martyr spec that you're currently playing as a Paladin in the raid at least, and the returning things. You have Divine Toll with your Divine Resonance Legendary, you have Avenging Wrath Might, so the extra 20% damage and healing to your Avenging Wrath. You have Awakening, which is your chance to give you wings for 10 seconds when you use a spender. So all of this stuff is returning from the current playstyle. You do have Tears Deliverance, your Legion artifact ability, which is, of course, being from those times, makes you have 20% more increased healing on your Flash of Light and Holy Light, which is once again something you wouldn't want to normally use. And even the new ability, the only brand new ability across all of this is Barrier of Faith. For the next 18 seconds, the Barrier of Faith accumulates 20% of the effective healing from your Flash of Light or Holy Light spells, which is, once again, something that with your Crusader Strike melee damage type of build, you're not really gonna be using. What this turns into is essentially trying to reconstruct the Paladin playstyle, the Paladin build that you currently have. So let's try to you know, get back all of the things you currently have. Let's try to get back all of the Light of the Martyr stuff. Let's try to get back our wings, our Awakening, our Divine Toll. Let's try to get our 2 charges of Crusader Strike with the cooldown reduction of Holy Shock with Crusader Strike. Basically try to get all of the things back and still not quite be able to get everything back. For example, things like Beacon of Faith or Beacon of Virtue, you can't even get. It takes 1, 2, 3 more points to be able to even get this. You can't play out with new things or extra empowerments like the 40-yard range to your Light of Dawn, or Light of Dawn as an extra chance, basically a piece of your tier set as an extra chance to double cast. All of these things are missing, and you have barely just completed your current Paladin build. The only extra is if you're playing Kyrian and Nightve at the same time. That's the problem I have with the newly revealed and newly shown Holy Paladin 3. It just doesn't work to mix two different playstyles, because for many other specs, certain playstyles are interchangeable. It's not that you either play 100% one playstyle or 100% the other, so everything in between is a waste. You can either spend all the points in one playstyle or all the points in the other playstyle. If you look at something like one of the many multi-changed specs like Survival Hunter, for example, Survival still has their entire line of talents for your bombs, your wildfire bombs, right? But at the same time, it's not that you're gonna start ignoring all of the other talents about, for example, Mongoose Bite or Raptor Strike damage, or your cooldowns, like the new cooldowns like Spearhead or Fury of the Eagle. You're not gonna ignore them. It's not that if you decide to play around your bombs, around your wildfire bombs, everything else becomes useless. You can still pick those talents and make use of them. The same goes for my own spec, something I know a little bit more about. If you play Resto Shaman and you decide to still play around your Riptide build, it's not that everything else, like for example Chain Heal, extra healing that you can get, suddenly becomes useless. In the case of Holy, on the other hand, it's much more black and white. It's much more stark, the difference between the melee playstyle and the ranged caster playstyle. And it feels like it's not really gonna work for Blizzard to try to mix and match so many different talents, because if you're playing a casted build, you're only gonna be playing with Flash of Light and with Holy Light and Holy Shock. You're not really gonna continue using Crither Strike or Judgment or Hammer of Wrath that often. Same goes in the opposite. If you play a melee build, you're not gonna cast Flash of Light, you're not gonna cast Holy Light, which creates this problem where there are gonna be so many talents that it's gonna just feel bad to play. If you decide to try to play a melee build, it's gonna feel bad whenever you see one of these talents buffing Holy Light or Flash of Light. Like this talent right here, you wouldn't really want to take it. This talent right here, you wouldn't really want to take it. This talent right here, you wouldn't really want to take it. And then you have this one, and then you have this one, and then you have this one right here. It just doesn't feel nice, because you know it's just something you're not gonna use. And as I said, it is quite unique to Holy Paladin. This is not really happening to many other builds, to many other specs, where they either choose, for example, if you're a mage. Imagine if Frost and Fire Mage were the same spec. Imagine if you decide to play the fire part of the mage, and then here you have a talent that says your Frostbolt and Ice Lance do 10% more damage. But you have already decided you're gonna be playing fire, so you don't need this talent, but you have to take it because you have to go down this line. So it just feels bad, it feels off to take this talent. The overall point is disappointment at the set of talents for Holy Paladin so far. I think Blizzard needs to make their mind up about how they see Holy Paladin being played in Dragonflight, whether they want them to be a melee spec for healer or if they want them to be a ranged. I don't think still trying to tiptoe around the line, to sit on the fence and try to give Holy Paladin both options is going to work out, because the only thing that's gonna do is make your talents worse. Because it's just gonna force the Paladin to just choose very specific talents. The Paladins who choose to be a ranged healer have to basically ignore all of this help for the melee version, and the opposite will be true as well. All of the Paladins who choose to remain in the current build of Holy Paladin, the melee healer build, will have to start ignoring several of the ranged healer talents, which is not, I guess, not like what you would expect these talents to be. This type of stark decision would have been much better fitting the current talents we have in Shadowlands, where you only have 3 options. So you're like, okay, the left talents are all for melee Paladin, the right talents are all for the caster range Paladin, and that's easy to choose. But in a talent tree, like this one, it makes it much worse. It makes it feel much worse to try to pick the right talents, because one of the main positives, one of the main things to praise these talents is the amount of choice they give you. So having to see the Paladin talent tree ruined by not really having choice, but rather having two very distinct playstyles put in the same tree, and having to essentially be forced to choose only the ones that fit your playstyle. So either you choose to play the ranged healer or you choose to play the melee healer, and you can only have those options as talents. It feels bad. It feels like a waste of all of these options as a Holy Paladin. Of course, there is the third possibility, that Blizzard somehow makes it possible to play both the melee version of Paladin and the ranged version of Paladin at the same time. Perhaps somehow, some way they can weave in between you casting your melee damaging abilities and Holy Shock and Light of Dawn and Word of Glory in melee range, and then somehow still make it possible for you to use your Flash of Light and Holy Light in some way to make it worth. In that case, these talents would be much better, but at the moment it seems quite unlikely. At the moment the tree just seems like it is quite confused in what it wants to do for Holy. So that was the point of today, mostly because I like that Holy Paladin gives you a different option as a healer to be in melee, to be basically a melee DPS at times, but it doesn't look like these talents are quite agreeing with each other with what they want you to do in Dragonflight. So this was my point for the talents of Holy Paladin. The talents themselves, the options themselves, aren't that bad if you take them in isolation. The problem is when you put them together and when you start thinking about the different ways the Paladin has to play, they are much more restrictive than other specs and classes. Other specs and classes can dip their toes in different builds, gain different passives or abilities that don't necessarily fit their main playstyle, but they can still use them just fine. In the case of Holy Paladin, it's a little bit more of a stark difference, of a black and white choice, which makes it much harder for you to enjoy taking all of these other talents that are not really fitting your build at the moment. So that's the concern for the moment for the Holy Paladin tree. Let me guys know, of course, what do you think, especially question directed at Holy Paladin mains, about how did you react, what are your first impressions about this talent tree for Holy Paladin, and then we will eventually see, hopefully, if and how much of a change the Holy Paladin tree gets. So with this we can stop for today. I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Friday. As usual, our round of applause to all of the patrons supporting me at this moment. Thank you guys for allowing me to continue to produce content and to deliver content to all of you as we get deeper into the alpha, and very soon, actually, it should be in a couple of weeks, actually, into the beta of Dragonflight. There's going to be more and more content to report on, so it's nice to know I have your support when I make these videos. Also, for the support, you can like and comment down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. That would be much appreciated. And lastly, for more imaginary friend behaviors, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon right down at these links. Subscribing, which of course will also give you access to my Discord server. If you ever want to pop by, ask some questions, give some feedback, some tips, I'm usually always available on Discord as well. With this being said and done, we can now leave each other for real. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, it's one of those days again. I thought everything was nice, done and settled, and turns out I actually have to go out and run an errand right now, which feels awful.